Since the mid-1960s, winter sports fanatics from around the world have flocked to the Austrian Alps to enjoy the breathtaking vistas and world-class skiing. For nearly 60 years, the stunningly beautiful resort area of Zellamsee Kaprun has been a haven for countless skiing and snowboarding enthusiasts. Unfortunately, Kaprun also carries the distinction of being the site of the deadliest rail disaster in Austria's history. At 9 a.m. on November 1, 2000, 161 passengers boarded the Gletscherbahn Kaprun 2, Kaprun Glacier Railway, Funicular Railway, headed for the Alpine Center atop Kitzsteinhorn Mountain. Many of the riders were regulars on the funicular, and all were anticipating a beautiful day on the glacial slopes of the 2-mile-high mountain. But the ordinarily 10-minute commute never reached the summit. By 9:30 a.m., all but 12 of the skiers who boarded the train that morning were dead, and the employees in the Alpine Center at the top of the mountain were fighting for their lives. What happened aboard the Gletscherbahn Kaprun 2 that cost 161 people their lives that day? And why was no one ever held accountable for such a devastating loss of life?
The train carrying many teenage skiers was trapped in a tunnel. Few escaped.
At least 150 people dead.
Smoke billowed out at the top of the tunnel from the train burning deep inside the mountain.
Initially constructed in 1974 and renovated in 1993, the Gletscherbahn Kaprun 2 Funicular Railway was one of 24 similar systems operating in Austria at the time. The lift employed two identical trains connected by a steel cable looping around a powerful winch system housed atop the mountain. With the two vehicles acting as counterweights, the cable system pulled one train up the mountain while lowering the other along 12,800 feet of a single track that briefly split in the middle, allowing the carriages to pass one another. Each train is designed with 8 individual compartments, 6 of which provide seating for up to 180 passengers. Each train also has cabins at both ends where the conductor rides, depending on if the train is traveling uphill or down. The conductor is responsible for opening and closing the passenger doors and communicating with the 2 loading centers, one in the valley and one in the Alpine Center atop the mountain. In the case of the Kaprun funicular, all but 2,000 feet of the 30-degree inclined track runs through a tunnel, a factor that contributed significantly to the nightmare that played out that fateful morning. At 9:02 a.m., the conductors shut the doors on the nearly full train in the lower boarding platform. Communicating with the Alpine Center via the power cable running alongside the tracks, the conductor gives the green light to begin their ascent. When the train is only 65 feet into its climb, Thomas Kraus, a passenger seated near the unoccupied conductor cabin at the rear of the ascending train, notices smoke coming from the compartment's control panel.
The first unusual thing I noticed was the smoke. It was like a cigarette that you put down for a moment.
Kraus attempts to open the door and enter the unoccupied conductor cabin where the fire extinguisher is located, but he finds it locked. One of the many design flaws that would be exposed that day is the lack of an intercom system that would have allowed Kraus to contact either the conductor or the Alpine Center about the fire. Instead, the train climbed for another 8 minutes before abruptly stopping approximately 2,000 feet into the tunnel. On the opposite end of the train, the conductor in the control room had no clue why the funicular had stopped. Since the train has no engine and therefore no fuel source, the possibility of a fire breaking out on the train has never been a concern for the operators of the Kaprun Glacier Railway. The conductor eventually smells smoke drifting past his window and contacts the Alpine Center to report a problem. But before he could open the hydraulically powered doors to release the passengers, the power went out, trapping 161 people and cutting off communication with management atop the mountain. While the conductor struggled to open the doors, the rear car filled with toxic smoke. A few passengers tried to call for help on their cell phones, but there was no reception in the tunnel. Others attempted to smash the acrylic, shatter-resistant windows with their ski poles, but by the time they succeeded in breaking the double panes of plastic, the fire was out of control. With the tunnel functioning as a chimney, the fire spread quickly as it sucked in oxygen from below like a furnace. Acrid smoke and intense heat billowed upward, engulfing both trains and filling the Alpine Center and shopping mall at the mountaintop end of the tunnel. Many passengers are asphyxiated by the smoke and never make it off the train, despite the conductor finally succeeding in opening the doors. Most of those who make it off get no more than a few feet before succumbing to smoke inhalation.
And what these people did in taking the decision to move upwards was to move up with the smoke, with the toxic gases and the heat, up towards a certain death.
Among the passengers who escaped through the broken window was Thorsten Gladler, a volunteer firefighter. Years spent fighting fires taught Gladler that the only chance of survival was to head down the tracks in the unlit tunnel, not up. But that meant trekking past the raging inferno engulfing the train they had just fought their way off. Imploring the other passengers to trust him, Gladler convinces 11 people to follow him down past the fire. Together, they stumble to safety along 2,000 feet of unlit track in bulky ski boots. They will be the only 12 to survive the Kaprun ordeal that day. By 9:23, 500 firefighters, 22 helicopters, and 100 rescue vehicles were on the scene. Unfortunately, the intense heat in the tunnel prevented first responders from hiking past the burning train to reach the remaining passengers, many of whom had attempted to flee uphill toward the Alpine Center. Worried that the blaze would melt the tow cable and send the fiery train barreling back down the mountain like a rocket, rescue attempts from below were called off, and the firefighters were pulled from the tunnel. With no way for rescuers to reach them, the remaining 152 people in the tunnel either asphyxiated by smoke or burned to death, including 2 conductors and the lone passenger on the downbound train. Smoke quickly filled the motor house, gift shop, and adjacent shopping mall in the Alpine Center. Employees bravely held their ground and attempted to restore power to the funicular until the alarm was sounded to clear the buildings. As the first employees fled, they propped open an emergency exit door, inadvertently intensifying the chimney effect created by the tunnel. The Alpine Center instantly filled with toxic smoke, rendering 4 employees unconscious. Firefighters are quickly on the scene, but are only able to resuscitate 1 of the downed employees. The other 3 would die of asphyxiation. In all, 155 people from 6 countries lost their lives that day, most of whom suffocated within 50 feet of the train. Among those to perish in what would later prove to be a tragically avoidable disaster were Sandra Schmidt, a German world champion freestyle skier, and 7-time deaf Olympic medalist Josef Schauper. With the Kaprun disaster making headlines around the world, the people of Austria were demanding answers. How could 155 people die by fire on a train that was supposed to be fireproof? And who was ultimately to blame for the disaster? Eva Danninger-Zoriat, the Salzburg public prosecutor assigned to the case, brings in an expert named Anton Muir to determine the cause of the fire. Fresh off the successful investigation of Austria's deadly Torin tunnel fire of 1999, Muir is uniquely qualified for the Kaprun inquiry, but he's met with resistance from the moment he arrives on the scene. Because the fire reduced the summit-bound train to ash, investigators would have to dissect her twin to determine the cause of the deadly fire. But when Muir arrived at Kaprun to review the evidence, he was initially denied access to the scene. Days later, when Muir was finally permitted to enter the tunnel, he discovered that a team from Austria's Central Criminal Investigation Office, known as the KTZ, had removed evidence from the scene. In fact, the entire sister train to the one that burned up had been shipped to a KTZ lab in Linz. As part of the Federal Ministry of the Interior, the KTZ's preliminary investigation determined that a fan heater installed during the 1993 train renovation was likely the cause of the fire. When the fan was finally sent to Anton Muir 4 months later, he too concluded that the heater caused a different reason than the KTZ. According to a 54-page report filed by Muir, traces of hydraulic fluid and insulating wool were found inside the heater. On the morning of the Kaprun disaster, these highly flammable substances came into contact with the 1,000-degree Fahrenheit heating element inside the fan, sparking the blaze. The initial fire is small, but its proximity to the leaking hydraulic fluid lines allows the heat to melt those plastic hoses. When the pressure in the hydraulics drops, the brakes automatically engage and stop the train in the lower third of the unlit tunnel. Ironically, one of the few safety measures on the train becomes a significant factor in the disaster as it leaves the train immobilized. Due to the malfunctioning hydraulics, the conductor is unable to open the doors and release the terrified passengers. As more hydraulic oil leaks out, the fire intensifies, consuming the rubber floor mats, wool insulation, and wooden panels behind the walls. Power cables running along the tracks also catch fire, cutting off communication between the conductor and the Alpine Center. Based on separate reports filed by Muir and the KTZ, prosecutor Eva Danninger-Zoriat charged 16 individuals with criminal negligence, including managers from the company that oversees the funiculars, the company that performed the renovations in 1993, employees from the company that installed the hydraulic lines, members of the Ministry of Transport, and inspectors from the Technical Inspection Association who signed off on the restoration work. The trial began on August 18, 2002, and would last nearly 2 years. The prosecution came in with a strong case, but Danninger-Zoriat quickly became aware that the government and tourism board would rather see the Kaprun disaster get swept under the rug than serve justice. Two crucial facts about the heaters installed during the renovation are central to the prosecution's case. First, the heaters are not designed for transport vehicles, and even come with a warning on the packaging that clearly states this. Second, in order to install the heaters in the conductor car, the plastic housing had to be disassembled and then put back together around the wall of the console panel. Safety information that came with the fans also warned consumers to dispose of a heater if the seal on the housing was broken. Ignoring this warning allowed oil from the hydraulic system to seep into the fan and contact the heating element, igniting the fire. In addition to the faulty heaters, the prosecution argued that the trains lacked even the most basic safety features, such as public access to fire extinguishers, an internal communication system, and smoke detectors. During the trial, investigators from the KTZ testified that the heater caused the fire, but they refused to blame anyone involved with installing the fans. Instead, they claimed that a malfunctioning flaw in the heater allowed the heating coil to contact the fan's plastic housing and ignite a fire. According to the defense, the maintenance employee who purchased the heaters was never told what they were for. As a result, the employee bought a different type of heater than the approved ones that management had requested. Attorneys for Gletscherbahn AG, the company that manages the rail system, also argued that a funicular is an elevator system, not a motor vehicle, so the warning on the fan's packaging did not apply. Amazingly, investigators from the KTZ never addressed the fact that the heaters were taken apart and reassembled in court. When Donninger Zoriad called on Anton Muir to help make her case, the defense slandered and bullied the investigator so relentlessly that he became depressed and sought psychiatric help. Judge Manfred Seiss, who was presiding over the trial, ordered an independent evaluation of Muir's mental state, which he then used to disqualify him as a witness. Following 2 years of testimony, Judge Seiss concluded that the safety standards of the day were met during the 1993 renovation of the trains and that no one could have foreseen such a disaster. In the end, a manufacturing flaw in the heater was listed as the official cause of the fire. When the trial ended in February 2004 with the acquittal of all 16 defendants, the state's prosecutors were as shocked and angry as the families of the victims, and for good reason. Just days after the trial, Judge Seiss and key witnesses for the defense attended a party celebrating the court's decision to hold no one accountable for the deaths of 155 victims. Local news outlets reported on this callous show of disrespect, but it did nothing to change the outcome. With help from a sympathetic judge working in coordination with the KTZ, Gletscherbahn AG avoided any and all legal and monetary responsibility for the Kaprun disaster. Then they did something unimaginably stupid. In a bizarre legal move that drew unwanted attention back to the Kaprun disaster, Gletscherbahn AG sued Funicular, the German manufacturer of the fan heaters installed during the Funicular's renovation. The company was seeking compensation for the victims' families, and they counted on the same sympathetic Austrian courts to side with it. That didn't happen. In a surprise move, the prosecutor's office in Salzburg turned the case over to German authorities. In 2005, the Heilbronn Public Prosecutor's Office near Stuttgart took over the case and asked the KTI Forensic Institute of the State Criminal Investigation Office to handle the investigation. The first thing the KTI investigators did was request a fan from the train that had survived the fire. As soon as they received this crucial evidence, investigators could see that the device had been tampered with. The fastener, meant to connect the heating element to the housing, was missing, and the element itself had been bent so that it touched the heater's plastic shell. This was clearly done to make the evidence match what the KTZ testified to in Salzburg. Investigators also discovered a red fluid inside the heater housing, which experts from the KTZ testified was nothing more than condensation. However, a sample tested in Germany proved it was hydraulic fluid, as Anton Muir claimed in his report. Most importantly, the German investigation showed that all the fans installed during the renovations had been disassembled and put back together over holes cut in the control panels. The KTZ clearly lied about these and other elements of the Austrian investigation. Photos of the heater from the first trial showed that the heating element in that fan had been properly attached and undamaged when it was pulled from the twin train by the KTZ in 2000. That meant that sometime between the initial investigation in Kaprun and the heater being sent to Germany, someone removed the fastener from the heating element and bent it against the plastic housing to match the testimony of defense witnesses in Salzburg. Not only did the KTC lie about what they discovered during their investigation, but they also tampered with the evidence so that it matched the defense's story. As a result, German authorities dismissed Gletscherbahn AG's lawsuit against Funicular. In their final report, the prosecutor's office in Heilbronn was highly critical of their Austrian counterparts, who clearly ignored the truth during the initial trial and investigation. Germany's KTI, 451 family members of the Kaprun victims forced Gletscherbahn AG to shell out $16.9 million in 2008. Sadly, as part of that settlement, the company admitted no wrongdoing. To this day, no individual has been held accountable for the worst peacetime loss of life in Austria's long history. The Gletscherbahn Kaprun II funicular never reopened and was eventually replaced with a 24-person gondola lift called Gletscherjet 1. In 2014, the lower bridge and valley loading station were removed, leaving only a pair of concrete footers marking the entrance to the sealed-off lower tunnel. In the valley, near where the original loading station once stood, an official memorial opened in 2004 to celebrate the memory of those who perished that day. The victims' families approved the design of the rectangular concrete building, which features 155 colored glass windows representing each of the victims who lost their lives on that tragic day. The memorial also serves as a stark reminder of what can happen when humans become overconfident in our technology and allow hubris to close our eyes to unseen threats of our own making.